Testosterone is the most important male sex hormone. Men who are heavily influenced by testosterone are said to be egotistical and they enjoy taking risks. But a number of European scientists have been trying to find out whether testosterone is really as bad as its reputation. We've come to the Münster University Hospital to talk to Dr. Michael Sitzmann, a German specialist in the treatment of diseases that affect men. He's also an expert on hormones.
Testosterone
is responsible for the development of a number of male physical characteristics, including hair patterns on the head. It also determines beard growth, affects muscles, and a man's overall personality. It's a much more complex hormone than some people might think.
Most testosterone is produced in the testes, but a small amount comes from the adrenal cortex. The specific sources of testosterone are the Leydig cells. The hormones that are responsible for developing male characteristics in the body are called androgens. The most important androgen is testosterone. Levels of testosterone rise dramatically during puberty and then remain at a high level. But researchers have also found significant short-term increases in this hormone immediately after birth.
It's hard to say why that happens, but it seems to be a part of the maturation process in the brain and in the male reproductive system.
Christian Wolf lives in Heilbronn. At the age of 20, he discovered that he had too little testosterone in his body. Doctors later determined that the cells in his brain were not sending out the proper production signals. The cause of the problem wasn't clear. At first, Wolf had a hard time even describing the symptoms. It took a long time for doctors to come up with a proper diagnosis.
Realizing that something was wrong was a gradual process. It didn't happen overnight. I kept feeling worse and worse. I had no energy at all, and no sex drive either. But I could feel something just wasn't right. And then I was diagnosed with depression. And I realized that something was seriously wrong with me.
Wolf was a medical student at the time and a bodybuilder. He kept a close eye on his metabolism and testosterone levels.
I couldn't figure out what was going on. I got along well with my family and had a girlfriend. I was doing well at school. And then I figured out that this might have something to do with a testosterone deficiency. So I had some tests done, and the levels turned out to be about 0. That's a bit low.
How much testosterone do men actually need?
On average, men have at least 8 to 12 nanomoles per liter of testosterone. Anything below that represents a deficiency, but the amount also depends on genetics. Women's testosterone levels are much lower, about 5 to 10% that of men's. They use the testosterone to synthesize estrogen, the primary female sex hormone.
That synthesis is carried out by an enzyme called aromatase. It can be found in cells in several parts of the body, including the brain, adrenal glands, ovaries and testes. In the face of such testosterone levels, Christian Wolf chose a potentially risky form of medical treatment.
I knew I needed hormone replacement therapy after other possible causes, like vitamin D or zinc deficiency, had been ruled out.
One of the side effects of hormone replacement therapy is that it suppresses sperm production, which can cause infertility.
Testosterone is naturally produced in the testicles, but the process begins in the brain, specifically in the hypothalamus. It links the body's nervous system to the endocrine system through the pituitary gland.
The pituitary gland is divided into two sections. The anterior portion produces two key hormones, LH and FSH. LH is responsible for stimulating the production of testosterone in the testes. FSH contributes to the production of sperm. These two hormones report back to the brain on whether the body is producing enough testosterone and sperm. The brain adjusts the amounts of each as necessary.
Testosterone replacement therapy suppresses the hormones in the pituitary gland that are responsible for sperm production. It's like a birth control pill. But if a man is testosterone deficient and wants to have children, we have to take a different approach.
Low testosterone can have serious effects on the body, but can too much of this hormone make men overly aggressive? This is Lyon, home of France's Centre for Cognitive Neurosciences. Jean-Claude Dreyer is a research director here. Dreyer has been studying the influence of testosterone on human behaviour, and he's found little evidence that testosterone stokes aggression in men.
The effect that testosterone has on human behavior is by no means clear, but there is some indirect evidence. For example, high levels of testosterone have been found in some prison inmates who've committed serious crimes. And we did a study which indicated that patients who are given testosterone injections could become more aggressive. But testosterone can also actually improve social behavior.
So at this point, there's little hard evidence pointing to a link between increased levels of testosterone and aggressive behavior. Dreyer conducted an experiment to try to prove or disprove these claims. His first task was to measure the testosterone levels in the participants' blood. Testosterone is a fat-soluble hormone, so it can pass through the membranes of cells, bind with hormone receptors, and then produce changes in the cell's structure. Testosterone can be identified and measured in various bodily fluids, including saliva, urine, and blood. Before the experiment begins, one group of participants is injected with testosterone. The other group is given a placebo.
We tried to determine whether the increase in testosterone levels would contribute to a change in behavior. This graph shows that both groups started out with approximately the same level of testosterone. Then we gave one group testosterone injections and recorded the increase in the level of this hormone.
Now the test subjects are going to take part in a game exercise called Ultimatum. The game is frequently used in behaviour research. It's designed to test whether a person is generous or selfish. One of the players is given a sum of money and is required to share part of it with the other. If the second player accepts the offer, the deal goes ahead as planned, but if he rejects it, neither player gets any money.
At this point, we observed no difference between the player who'd been given testosterone and the one who hadn't.
Now the rules of the game are going to change a bit. The players will be able to use the money to reward fair behaviour or punish unfair behaviour. And this is where Dreyer and his colleagues observed a difference between the player who got an extra dose of testosterone and the one who didn't.
It's a subtle difference. and we confirmed it only in the second stage of the experiment. The group administered with extra testosterone imposed a more severe punishment when they believed that they hadn't been given enough money. But at the same time, they also reacted more positively when given more money than expected. We observed a big difference in the behavior of the two groups.
So, can testosterone also stimulate generosity in men? The researchers were surprised by the results, but the situation is more complex than that. Dreyer says there's a subconscious motivation at work here.
This phenomenon shows clearly that you can improve your social status if you cooperate with people or engage in other kinds of positive social behavior. So while testosterone can influence aggression, it also plays a role in the ability to act with generosity.
Dreyer has been looking for more evidence to support his theory on the influence of testosterone. So he's been studying brain activity.
Testosterone-based behavior can improve a man's social status, and that process could be linked to various mechanisms in the brain, particularly a group of neural structures known as the reward system.
Improved social status generates a sense of well-being, like a reward. That may explain the boasting trait commonly associated with excessive manly behavior.
There's always a motivation behind generosity. If someone sees you being generous, they're more likely to think highly of you. For example, men will probably be more generous if they know that they are being observed by women. This indicates another link between testosterone and generous behavior.
So testosterone may be responsible for positive and negative behaviour. In both cases, this behaviour seems to be directed at preserving or even improving social status. Psychologist Pranjal Mehta is an associate professor at University College in London. His research focuses on how hormones, particularly testosterone, influence human behaviour.
The evidence for that myth that testosterone is directly related to masculine traits like aggression has not borne out in the data. So there are plenty of results suggesting that testosterone is either weakly or unrelated to aggressive behavior at all in humans, including human males. So the field is still trying to unpack these kinds of effects to understand when testosterone might be related to other behaviors like helping and pro-social behavior as well.
Mehta has carried out an experiment that involves the ultimatum game, similar to the one we saw earlier.
It's actually a way to look at two kinds of behaviors. One is trust. To what extent is the first mover trusting? And two, to look at reciprocity of trust. If someone is hyper-trusting, is the second mover going to reciprocate that trust?
As in the experiment carried out by Jean-Claude Dreyer, one player was given an extra dose of testosterone. The other player was given a placebo. The experiment will measure the level of trust between the two. The player administered testosterone can use his money to make sure that the other player also profits. But will the second player give back some of his winnings as a gesture of gratitude? Or will he keep it all for himself?
We found two interesting effects. First is consistent with the stereotype, testosterone reduced trust in the first mover. So that is somewhat consistent with the stereotype of testosterone being related to competitiveness and threat in the environment, and maybe mobilizing more selfish social behaviors, right? So I want to keep the money.
Next, the players reverse their roles.